Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Corey Marcus.
And I'm your host, Felicia Marcus.
And you are now tuned in to another episode of Pineapples and Palm Trees podcast. Welcome back, everybody. Last week, we were talking about marriage and how some people are common law married. And they don't want to get the piece of paper. Don't feel it's a necessity. And is there a point where you think that, do you think people need the piece of paper?
Once upon a time, yes. Because I think it's like what society forces in your head for most of your, at least my childhood. You got to grow up, you got to get married, you got to, the white picket fence and the family and the house with the kids and the dog and, that whole picture that everybody wants to paint as a child. And I feel like they always made it sound like it wasn't real if there wasn't a piece of paper involved. And so to me, I think that also was a reason I shied away from wanting to get married most of my life, is because it was like, you're going to tell me it's not real because there's not a piece of paper involved? Well, what do you even mean?
Do you think that piece of paper makes people put in more effort, though?
In the beginning.
Because if you don't have the piece of paper, kind of like in your mind, you're already like, well, if this fucking screws up, well, I have an out. I don't have to get
that's very true.
Divorced. I don't have to. Yeah. So you're kind of just waiting on it to screw up.
I completely understand where you come from, yes, because that makes total sense, absolutely, because like you said, you already have an out, you already have one foot out the door, essentially. But if you have kids involved, there's still, you actually, even if you're not biological, even if you're not legally married, if you have kids, I know where the state we're from, you still have to do what is it called? It's kids coping with divorce or whatever. Even if you're not actually married, if you split up and have to go through custody agreements, you still have to take those classes.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's you're still basically married. Just because you didn't have that piece of paper involved, you still live together, you still house together. Your kids still thought you were together, mom and dad in a house, that
That's
type of
true.
thing. And so the paper, I feel in the beginning it makes people try harder, but then afterwards I feel they get comfortable because of that. Yeah. But to me, that's kind of strange too, because it's if you want out, you want out. I don't feel anything stops anybody from wanting that, but I definitely think it makes people think twice, where if you didn't, you're gotta go.
Yeah, because I know several people and ran into several people that they don't want to actually get married by the courts or have files of it, but will say they're married.
Yeah, I don't get that. If you're not married, don't say you're married.
And being married now and being younger versus what I thought it was, and
when we were young, everybody's relationship on Facebook was Mrs. whoever they were dating.
Yeah, it was so weird.
Everybody was a wifey.
And I had just had this preconceived notion that marriage ended your entire life, and marriage was you got married just to stick with that one person, and not I'm not talking about monogamy or anything like that, but I'm saying,
and that's kind of what you sign up for as well.
Yeah. But I'm saying people go into relationships and that's why they don't want to have the technical title married or the piece of paper married, because they don't want to feel they're tied down. They don't want to feel their life is their life is ended and now they have to share a life with somebody else.
That kind of makes sense, but at the same time, if you're living life like that, thinking, oh, our lives are separate, then you're already kind of screwing up, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
you're living
the goal of marriage
lives.
is not to get divorced. We're not encouraging that. We're just letting you know
if it's a healthier option, by all means do it. But
marriage is another step in a relationship.
Yeah, it's just, I would never pursue persuade somebody to get divorced, but
Oh no.
if it's a healthier option, always.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
For sure.
but I always say, like, don't give up until you've exhausted all efforts.
So I bring that up to ask, when moving like from fiance or even like girlfriend to fiance for you, and then fiance to a wife or wife title, was there things that you had to change, like mindset wise? Are there things that you had to give up? Do you think it was better? Do you think it was worse?
I don't know, because I feel like in the very beginning of our relationship, I was very much like, I wouldn't say advocating for it to be more than what it was, but I definitely acted as though it was more than what it was. Because we were definitely not on the same wavelengths in the beginning of our relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I definitely am that person that I feel like I give, what do they say? Don't ever give,
Yeah,
gosh.
don't give don't get paid, don't do wife duties at a girlfriend price now.
Yes. And I definitely feel like I did that. Like, even like obviously with you, I was definitely like, I was making you lunch for work, and like,
Oh yeah.
I was making sure you had lunch at work.
But do you
driving
think
up to
those
you all
things
the
are like
times,
preparing to become a wife? Or
I
like,
mean,
should you invest some time before you do that? This is like some advice for some ladies that are going.
I would definitely
going through
say
it right
invest
now.
time before you do that, just because, like, looking back, I wouldn't say I sold myself short, but I definitely didn't have as much respect for myself back then as I do now.
Okay.
But I obviously, like, I feel like with us, it's way different because we had history. So I could,
Yeah.
like, to me, we are also very comfortable with each other. So, like, a lot of my actions and behaviors came with the comfortability of, like, knowing who you were already and, like,
That
being
makes
comfortable
sense.
with you. But, like, I would definitely say that, like, I would be more reserved. I wouldn't say reserved, but, like, taking your plate and things like that, which
Yeah.
I guess if you want to do that, do it. But I wouldn't make it like, don't let him treat you differently if you don't.
Would you put that in like the fiance category?
Probably, yeah, because at that point you really are preparing to be a wife. Like, you need to, like, change a lot of, I wouldn't say change a lot of your behaviors, but you're no longer
Ooh.
like,
Talk about that.
you're no longer,
Because some people
like,
think like your boyfriend, girlfriend, your fiancés, and then you go into the marriage stage and everything, you have to stay the same, and you think they're the same person, and you think you can bring the same person to each stage of the relationship.
yeah, you can't. And I
what's that like?
definitely think, I think for you, you have more of an example than me, just because, like, there was a time and point where I literally had to tell you you couldn't treat me like a friend anymore because I was more than that. And that was a hard
Yeah.
one for you to, like, realize, because we had been friends at the length, I'd say the length, but, like, the way we had been friends for so
Yeah.
long that was, like, comfortable for you. And so you were very comfortable
For
with,
sure.
oh, this is my best friend. That's
I would do anything
more than a
for
best
you
friend.
and take a bullet for you.
Yeah,
But
100%.
my behaviors definitely weren't like boyfriend material.
Yeah. They were more like, this is still my friend.
Yeah.
They're my
I was your
best
ride or die
friend.
bestie.
Which,
And
yeah.
I had to go to therapy for that. We had to go to therapy.
100%.
And that was kind of like the choice you gave me at the time.
Yeah, because I had already made those changes, and, like, I had already looked at you differently. I'd already treated you differently. And so,
And I didn't understand that.
yeah.
I completely didn't understand whenever you would tell me like these things are like what I need to do, and I was like, wow, we're doing great. We get along. We do everything together. And then when we went to therapy, and the lady was sitting there talking to us, and she was like, well, you're not showing up as this. I said, oh wow, it makes sense coming out of your mouth.
Yeah, definitely didn't make sense coming out of mine, because, you know, I didn't get paid for it.
So I had to reevaluate a lot of like the things I was saying, the way I was moving, the things I was doing, a lot of my behaviors, because they were just friend behaviors. And then I had to move into the boyfriend role, but I already knew I wanted to be a husband, but I didn't know how
We
to
were
be.
already engaged at that
Yeah,
point.
I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a fiance. I just knew how to be a nice, loyal person and that's about it. And that's what a lot of people misconstrued about relationships and like marriage and stuff, is they think that they just can come in and just like, oh, we're good, we love each other, we know each other, and this is what it is, we're gonna get married. And then like people don't know how to talk.
We definitely didn't know how to talk for a long time.
That shit was eye-opening, and
a lot of years.
Yeah, a lot of years. And it took work on both ends. Like it's and
it's not to say that we don't like necessarily fall back into those bad habits every once in a while now, but they're way less frequent. Way less. Like way.
And we know how to manage it when those feelings and like those behaviors want to come out, and it's like, I have the skills to not do this at the moment, and we can choose something better and figure this out. But before, whenever you're dating or whenever you're still in that like groove of growing, because you're always growing, but whenever you're in the first move of growing, that shit's hard. And especially like when you have to look at yourself and be like, I have to make the changes. And then a lot of people, whenever they don't want to make the changes, they're like, you make the changes or I'm gone. And it's like, wait a minute, goddamn it. Yeah. We both signed up for this. Like, it's like playing a game. You can compare it to any game that has two different sides. If one side shows up and is playing the game and the other one doesn't, well,
very one-sided. It's
kind of boring one, and nobody's really going to want to watch that or stick around. Probably not even the other team.
No.
So people are going to get tired of playing, and the game's going to be over.
Like your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn.
And it's that I'm still up here trying to do this, and what are you doing over there drinking water? You don't even care about what's going on over here. And eventually the game fizzles out, and you're done. So if you want to constantly play the game, you got to constantly be in the game, but don't be so much in the game that you're not paying attention to the game.
Well, that and that you forget who you are outside of the game.
Shoot, dog. Some bars. Don't be so much in the game that you forget the game. And what'd you say?
You said that you could forget the game, but I said that you don't forget who you are outside of the game. That you
don't forget who you are outside the game. Hot diggity dog. You show up to that game and you play your heart out. But every once in a while, you got to use the bathroom. You got to go eat. You got to take a nap. It's
just like with the basketball game, like you play up or with the football game, like NFL players, they show up every Sunday and they are very much in the game and all that. But like outside, that's why a lot of them like quit and all that, because they lose themselves in the game.
They become football and not.
Yeah. They're no longer them.
The person who plays football.
Exactly.
Ooh.
And then so like
good.
you become.
Look at you using sports references.
You become like the husband, but you don't forget. You're no longer the person that became that husband.
Become Mr. Married Man. Yeah. Instead of the husband. And nobody wants to be Mr. Married Man. You don't want to be Mr. Married. If you're Mr. Married, you're upset. You don't know how to talk to your wife. You seem like she's always yelling at you, nagging at you. And you do things that you're smart off at the mouth every chance you get. Nothing's positive. You're just being Mr. Married. You want to transfer into that husband mode and learn her love language and talk to her the way she wants to be talked to and love her the way she wants to be loved. And women thrive. Women fucking thrive whenever you, what's the word I'm looking for? Uptalk? Uplift? Uplift them.
I think.
Boy, I tell you what, women rule the world. And we're,
as cliche as it sounds, happy wife, happy life.
No,
I think that's so cliche that I hate when people use that.
I love that saying. However,
it's so not true, though.
Everybody, men, women, you got to realize your man's in the relationship too.
Exactly. That's why I say, like, I know it's not true. I just think it's so funny when people say it, because it's like, that's so unrealistic.
People will press it on you,
but
too.
People live by that. Like, unfortunately, somebody said that at work the other day, and it was just like, you really feel that way? Like, that's unfortunate that
Men
you
will
feel
press
that way.
everything down that they possibly have to make sure the wife is happy, and that's why your dumbass goes out and cheats. That's why your dumbass is at the bar. That's why you're working long hours. That's why your knuckles hurt. That's why your back hurts. That's why she only cooks your meals and don't want to look at you when you're having sex. You know what I'm saying?
That's really
I mean,
funny.
it's very true because you're in it to please her, and once you do that for so long, I'm not saying women in general, but the human mind, we start to expect that shit, and whenever it doesn't happen, people get a preconceived notion that things are changing.
Yeah.
So, and people don't like that. But yes, whenever you're in a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, married, men, you are a part of the relationship. It is your feelings that matter too. Oh, cool, you sound like a bitch. Oh, cool, you're upset. Tell your lady. Who else you gonna tell? The other lady? Why?
You shouldn't be pillow talking on nobody.
Exactly. Then you might as well make that your lady. And then you're going to feel like a bitch because you're talking to her because she's your lady. Then you can go talk to the next bitch. It's a bad cycle. It's a terrible cycle. Men, it's a bad cycle. But I want to move into a part of our podcast, and it's called What Would You Rather Be? And I want to ask you this. What would you rather be? A pineapple or a palm tree?
Okay. So I'm going to go with a pineapple.
And why?
For a lot of reasons. If you look at a pineapple, on the inside, the core is very hard. And so it's very, like, one thing I hate about people most is when they don't have a backbone. So, like, you can't stand up for yourself. So, a pineapple can stand up for itself.
If you don't stand up for something, you're going to fall for anything.
Exactly. So, like, a pineapple can stand up for itself. So, it's got a strong core. It has the pokey outside, so it's got like its defense mechanism already. And then the soft inside, because, you know, it's soft and juicy, as weird as that sounds.
Ooh,
but it's like soft and juicy and, like, you know, got some body to it.
Yeah.
And then the crown, because isn't that what the top of a pineapple is called, is the crown?
Yeah.
So, like, they always have a crown standing tall. So
wear
it's
your
like,
crown high
exactly.
and proud. Don't let nobody take it away.
And so I would definitely always choose to be a pineapple because I feel like there's a lot more to a pineapple than what people just think when they look at it.
There is. And a pineapple, I want to say it takes like 7 years to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And like, to me, I feel like that's a true definition of, like, when you're trying to, like, learn yourself as an adult, it doesn't happen overnight.
Look at you talking heavy.
It definitely, like, it takes a long
Talk
time. It takes a long time. So it's like, that's even more reason to, like, choose a pineapple because, like, granted, a tree can just sprout up, but that's literally the only way it can go is, like, up.
Did you know it takes a palm tree like 3 years or so to become like an actual big old tree?
Oh, see, that's not a long time.
Not as long as a pineapple, no, for
Definitely
sure.
not. Your taste buds change in the amount of time a pineapple takes to grow. So
very true. Very true.
Your taste buds could change in life. So
very true.
But yeah.
It takes a long time to grow. And that's another reason why we name this pineapples and palm trees, because it takes so long to grow that people give up on it and they stay the same. And whenever somebody betters themselves or grows, they're mad and upset because they didn't stay the same. And then they can't understand why they don't understand them anymore because they talk different, they do different things, they make more money or whatever the case may be. And people are still doing the same thing they were 5 years ago. Yep. And they want different results.
Can't expect them. What is that? The definition of insanity?
Insanity, doing the same thing. And that's what people do in relationships. Y'all be dating for 5 or 6 years, still doing the same thing. Y'all still going to the same busted old restaurant. Y'all still going to the same old the spot. It's okay to have that, you know, that one spot. Yeah. Going to Applebee's because the song told you to. Y'all be fucking doing that rusty and dusty shit. Listen. You know what I'm saying? Switch it up. Go to if you have a spot and you do it every year, cool. If you have a spot and you do it every weekend, cool.
Even if it is Applebee's, I ain't hating on you.
If you have your spot,
but man, you could do better.
Cool. But if you're not elevating your game every year, if you're not doing something different every year, I mean, where are you really going?
I'm trying to go to those restaurants that people look at you crazy when you're not dressed nice.
Crazy. What are they doing here?
Exactly.
Sheesh, mamish.
trying to be like, well, I got to get ready to go to that restaurant.
Speaking of which, get a little off topic here. We went to a restaurant. What was it called in, I want to say Branson. We were with the kids.
Oh, no, that was when you guys came to see me on one of the work trips. Springfield?
Oh, yes, we were in Springfield.
And it was like looked fancy as it was so fancy.
I can't remember the name of it, but shout out
BJ's,
them.
FB's,
FB's Steakhouse, something like that. I don't know. It looked super fancy, super fancy, and
so fancy.
The menu was popping. Prices were on right.
The prices were actually really cheap.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Prices were right.
We were shook. By the outside, like you definitely thought you were dropping some money going there.
Yeah, and it was like
even when you walk in,
older folks like dressed nice going in. You're like, shit, we should bring our 3 kids in here.
Exactly.
And then we go in, and we got treated very, very well.
Oh man, that was like one of the craziest experiences of my entire existence.
We got treated very well.
Like somebody like gave the waitress money to put on our tab. Like that's never happened.
That was crazy.
And definitely, I would definitely say the more so because like. The people that put money on our tab was like crazy to me because they were very much older, like much older. And not to be like stereotypical, but we do get looked down on a lot in public as being a interracial relationship, interracial couple. And we have kids interracially and all that. So like the older generation's not as accepting to it. And so like Facts. For this table, like they just kept going on and on about how beautiful our family was and all this other stuff. And then like to give the waitress money to like put towards our bill, it was like crazy.
Yeah, when she came over and said that, it was like, what?
Yeah. And like it wasn't even expensive. So it was like, appreciate you. Because like, that. Yeah, it's definitely wild. Like, not going to complain because, that was pretty cool. It was a cool experience.
Yeah. If you could go back and tell your, let's see, 15-year-old self, if you could give your 15-year-old self some advice, what would you tell 15-year-old you today?
Oh, man, a lot. Because I vividly remember 15. And like that's when I feel like I started definitely making one of the biggest changes in my life.
Okay.
Not for the better.
All right. Tell us.
It was just when people start to experiment in life and things of that nature started around that time. Yeah. And like I didn't have a lot of respect for myself. And not to say that I was out there doing crazy things. I wasn't doing crazy things. Yeah. But I was still too young to be doing anything. Freaking That's kissing. Shouldn't have been kissing anybody. Yeah. Granted, 15 nowadays, everybody's having kids at that age. But like, you shouldn't be. Like, you really should not be.
So
like,
what's that one piece of advice that you'd tell yourself looking back right now?
Boys don't matter. Like, ooh. They genuinely don't matter.
We really don't.
And like, I don't mean it rudely, but like, I was so like wrapped up in the whole like, oh, I gotta find the high school sweetheart. Yeah. The whole cliche
Which
thing.
Was me.
That, listen, you were there the whole time, but
which was me.
It's just wild that like, as crazy as it sounds, like not going away to college because of choosing like a relationship was one of the dumbest decisions I've ever made in my entire existence as a human. Granted, I was a little older than 15, but it's still, I mean, obviously I wouldn't be where I am today if
I was
my
just
life
about
would have
to
changed
ask.
And all of that.
I was just about to ask, do you think you would be as fulfilled as you feel today if you would have finished your college bound?
That's a tough one.
Your college bound? That was terrible. If you finish like your college education, do you think?
That's a really tough one because in certain aspects, yes.
Okay.
And in the other aspects, no.
Okay.
Because one, I would have experienced like living for me, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like going to the parties, things like, granted, I went to a few parties after high school. I didn't do a lot because of the relationship I was in at the time. And so I definitely feel like I wouldn't feel like I missed out on that part of my life like I currently do. Mm-hmm. And so that's a struggle for me, is just knowing that like I never experienced that life that everybody gets to experience, quote unquote.
So I got to I went to community college first.
But you still were away from home.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And, got to meet a lot of new people. And I went to those parties. Granted, it was a smaller college, but it was mainly like, I only went to a couple, but it was mainly like athletes. And if you weren't an athlete, which I wasn't an athlete in college, you didn't fit in. And people noticed like who you were because
but
you
I think
weren't a
that's
part
because
of
of
their.
the small town you were in. Because I went to
Yeah.
like places at OSU, like back home, and
Yeah,
it's-
that
it was
was
intense.
that'd have been dangerous.
It was insane.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I don't know how I genuinely don't know how people are successful in college living that lifestyle every day. I don't get it. Maybe I couldn't have been, and maybe that's why I didn't go.
Yeah. I'll say towards my end of my college run, though, drinking became out of control. But again, that was fall back into a relationship problem because I was trying to change myself and change who I was for everything else. And let me go ahead and clarify for y'all. Changing yourself is totally different than growing. When you grow, you become a better you. When you change yourself, you become a different person. So you can't compare the two. There's no gray space. It's either you change and don't like who you are, or you grow into a better you. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like you can't, like
I would say definitely like when you're growing, you're making that choice. Whenever you're changing, it's typically because somebody suggested it, somebody told you needed to, it was referred to you, that type of thing. When you're growing, you're making that choice. You're doing that work yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not somebody like telling you to do it. Maybe somebody suggested that you need to work on that area, but like you're not changing for them. Where with like changing and especially in the situation you're like the example you're giving, you were trying to change to please somebody else.
So communication is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Because if you don't know how to clearly communicate, then things get misconstrued. But also, like, a part of communicating is listening to understand and not just listening or waiting for them to be done so you can say your piece. And that took a lot of time to understand, to like, well, this is how and how you feel is not a reflection on what the other person's meaning to do to you. Like, if I feel some type of way for something you did, it's not necessarily that you meant to make me feel that way. It's not necessarily meant that you were intentional about it. But something about that triggered something inside me to make me feel that way.
Yeah. And I would definitely say that you also, I'm trying to think how to say, like, you can't just assume that you know because of somebody's past, like, oh, they responded this way previously, they're going to do it this time.
Yeah.
You have to give them the chance to do it.
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, well, we talked about this last time, you still did it this time, blah, blah, blah. But you have to give them the chance before you can just assume that that's going to happen and then try to avoid it because you're like, well, this is going to happen if I do this. Ooh. Well, how do you know?
That's true. That's true.
Because like way back in the day when we used to have like, you know, in the beginning of our relationship when I had terrible trust issues.
Yeah.
Anytime like you'd be like, well, you never give me the chance. And it's like, well, I do give you the chance. You just don't take it because you're afraid of how I'm going to behave.
Yeah.
And that was always the thing was
like,
you were always telling me, you never give me the chance. And I'm like, no, I do. You just don't take it because you're so afraid that I'm going to continue to behave the way that I used to.
That and like, I had to learn to trust myself as well. Because like I could trust somebody to trust me, but I couldn't trust myself. And that wasn't like a trust of, what do you say? Like, I knew I couldn't trust myself because it was just, I can't think of the words. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of men. Like we don't, so I don't say a lot of men, some men.
Somebody's gonna be triggered by that.
Yeah. Like if your wife gives you the reins or your girlfriend gives you a little bit of slack in your rope and lets you go out and, in your heart of hearts, you're like, yeah, she trusts me. But like, if you don't trust yourself, you know that feeling whenever you're like, oh yeah, she's giving me a little bit too much trust, so I can try to be loose with it and try to push the boundaries. That's what I'm talking about. You see
you
how
feel like you did?
No, I'm saying like
okay.
that's why I didn't, because like I knew like myself, I'd be like, I'd try to test the boundaries, and that's not a good thing if you want a fucking long-standing, healthy fucking relationship. And I definitely wanted that with you, but I knew that was something like from past relationships. Like, great, you trust me. Now I'm going to see how far you're going to let me push my trust. But that was before communication, learning how to set boundaries, learning what boundaries were. And that goes back to our therapy when we went to therapy. And the lady was like, when she was like, well, I don't even know how she worded it, but she was said, we said, don't do something you wouldn't want the other person to do. Well, fuck, come to find out, there was things that you didn't want me to do that I didn't know. And there's things I didn't want you to do that you didn't know.
Yeah.
So while you think you're on the same page, like, you got to clarify. Even if you're nervous, even if you're scared, you got to clarify. Because if you don't, like, you're just going to be hung out to dry. So, yeah.
Very true. Yeah, definitely. The saying was, don't ever do anything that you wouldn't want the other person to do. That was the saying. And that was, I remember when you told her that and she was like, well, what does that mean? And you were like, well, like, it's kind of self-explanatory. We both kind of looked at each other and were like, it's kind of self-explanatory, isn't it? And she was like, no. She was like, because then she asked, her exact words were, what's your definition of cheating? And we had two entirely different definitions of cheating. And she was like, and there's the breakdown.
Yeah.
She was like, because when you think that cheating is this and he thinks cheating is this, that was the example she used. She was like, you're not on the same page.
Yeah. Because you could be out there and...
Because I think yours was like full on like physical...
Yeah.
At the time, it was like physical touch, and I was like, "Yo, if you're deleting a text message you don't want me to see, like you're already going too far." And you're like, "Whoa, like what?"
And like you always read it, but like you don't know. I don't want to say you don't know, but some things that you may not view as inappropriate, your partner may, and how they feel.
That's definitely a situation we ran into.
Yeah, and how they feel is how they feel, and you can't fucking tell them not to fucking feel that way. And you can't tell them that your behavior didn't cause it, because it did. And now you have to figure out a way of like, you have to talk of like, okay, well, what was it? How can I fix it? And then you have to make the active steps to fix it. Because if you don't make the active steps to fix it, sheesh mamish, you're just going to fucking try to do it again. Yeah. And
yeah, because I mean, if you're doing it, if you're getting away with it, you're gonna just keep pushing and until you just can't anymore, you know.
So true. But yeah, we appreciate y'all listening in. Tune in next week for another episode of Pineapples and Palm Trees podcast. We're going to be talking about, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Oh man. Maybe like how childhood traumas can affect relationships.
Your childhood trauma
without
affecting
knowing.
your relationship.
I would say knowing and without knowing. Because some people know that they have issues, they just don't care to.
And it starts young.
Yeah,
it starts young. That's why some people be out there being promiscuous at 12, 13, because sheesh mamish, you know what I'm saying? So tune in next week to another episode of Pineapples and Palm Trees podcast. We're going to talk to you about how childhood traumas affect your relationships. And hopefully you get to thinking on, damn, what happened growing up that has affected me now in my relationship? What don't I like about it? And how the fuck can I change it?
Yeah.
change your mind, change your life, grow together, love each other. I'm Corey Marcus.
I'm Felicia Marcus, and don't forget to wear your crown high.
Hey, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week.